like we're going to get started here. Just 1 second. All right, we're getting started here. Nice. Welcome everyone, welcome. Those on TikTok, go ahead, tap the screen, share the live. We're going to get started here. Today we're going to be talking about the concept of hate and dealing with hate, and how we can combat that. So if this is your first time joining in, my name is Tina. I am a happiness coach. I help people deal with depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts, and being able to help them move into a happier place, whether that is in your profession, your personal life, or your professional life. These are the areas that I help with. So, and I do this by sharing my personal experience, strength, and hope, in hopes that you can actually apply some of the things that I've learned along the way. My background, I came from an abusive childhood and had a lot of trauma in my past. I've done a lot of healing work over the years, and these are tools that I use on a regular daily basis, and I am here sharing them with you guys because my goal is to be able to help 1 million people heal past trauma. So if you're on TikTok, go ahead, tap the screen, share the live. Welcome everybody. Nice to see everybody rolling in here. That's awesome. So like I said, today the topic is dealing with hate, and we're going to deal with this in various different levels and various forms of hate, and then how we combat that with love. So if this is your first time, I've talked a lot about how one of the foundational principles that I run every aspect of my life through is there's either love or there's fear. Fear is false evidence appearing real, and everything is either an expression of or a cry for love. And I learned this from Marianne Williamson, her book, Return to Love. I read that in my early 20s, and I actually applied that to my life. So I would highly recommend her book, and go check that out. And it was funny because I read it a few years afterwards, and I went back and I was like, wow, I actually apply this. I actually live this. And I didn't realize that the change in my behavior came from that book until I reread it. And I was like, oh, that's cool. So, so I heard an expression, and I've said this before too, and I'm going to give a story of the best example that I had of this. So there's the saying that you don't have to actually like somebody to learn from them. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I agree with that. That's true. And there's been people that I have I don't particularly like all the things that they do or say, and I'm able to still get benefit out of what it is that they're saying. Learning to have that open mind and keep that open mind allows you to be able to maybe gain some insight or perspective that you wouldn't necessarily have if you only stick with the people that you're used to and the people that share your viewpoints and share your opinions. So learning to, hey Abdul, good to see you on Facebook. Learning to be able to take in that different viewpoint, be open to understanding, is actually a level of mastery. And my biggest challenge, I had a good example of this. So I liked Trump when he was on The Apprentice, and I love that show. I liked some of the business philosophies that he had, and I liked the show. And then he went and ran for president, and I didn't really like him, and I didn't like his philosophies and his ideals. But I also ended up gaining a different perspective. And I could appreciate him leveraging various marketing tactics and strategies to, you know, achieve his goals. So I ended up going to a conference where I didn't know that he was going to be a speaker, and it's probably a good thing because I probably would have avoided it. I would have not gone. However, because I was in the actual room and I sat there and listened, I thought, okay, I actually have to, sit here, keep an open mind, and see if I can get something from it. And I actually ended up getting 3 really good takeaways. And of all the people that we've known publicly, I don't think anybody's really experienced more direct hate from people than Trump has. And I remember Grant Cardone actually asking him, how did he deal with all of that? Because that level of criticism, and when you have that in entrepreneurship, that's a regular thing. There's always going to be somebody that doesn't like what it is that you're doing. There's always going to be people that'll tell you that you shouldn't do the things that you're doing and that you're wrong for doing those things. And so learning to deal with that level of hate and criticism is like next level. And so I could appreciate it. And his focus was, yeah, there was a lot of hate, but there was also a lot of love. So it's a matter of where you put your perspective and what it is that you choose to focus on. So if you operate from the principle of anything that is an expression of fear or anger or criticism and judgment and all of those kind of hateful spectrum emotions, if you look at all of those and you see that they're just coming from a place of fear, then you can have a different perspective, a different understanding of it, and then you are actually able to overcome the challenges. And when he talked about some things with the government and changing changing old structures, right, of old laws that were in place and old things that they weren't serving a purpose. Nobody had really gone back and visited them. And I'm like, well, shit, I've actually done that in business. And I was like, oh, okay, I can appreciate that. And then his negotiation skills with the leader of North Korea. I always forget his name. I just don't want to butcher it. I think that's why I hesitate. What the hell is the leader of North Korea? I should probably know this. Anybody got that? Okay. Anyway, so nobody really likes to deal with that, and everybody criticized him for actually winning him over and having good negotiations. And I'm like, and I was that way too, and I was thinking, but that doesn't actually make any logical sense, because and I've done this many times in business where I'm the one that gets sent in to deal with the person that's being unreasonable, the person that is being argumentative, the person that is being hateful. I get sent in to go talk with those people and to negotiate with them and I've always been successful with it. Why? Because I actually seek to understand their perspective rather than coming in where everybody else approached it with judgment and hatred, and it's like, oh, these guys, they're difficult, they're a pain in my ass, and they don't see the thing, they're so hard to deal with, all those kind of, so you go in with those preconceived ideas and it ends up causing problems, right? So now you can have that, hey, I don't really like this person, and yes, I feel better because I can actually learn from them and stuff like that. But I'm going to challenge us to actually dig a little bit deeper and understand internally, why is it that we are feeling uncomfortable with them in the first place? What is it about them that we're not liking? Why don't we like them? That is the bigger question, and it's really, that points to our own internal fear that we have, and that is false evidence appearing real. So it's like, What is it about them? Now, we could have a whole list of reasons of why we don't like them. Maybe they don't hold the same values or principles, or they're always late, or they don't take things seriously. They're always joking around, and they're whatever it is that we have. These are all judgments that we have, and those are all expressions of fear. So when we look at that kind of stuff, if we're operating from that place, even on a small level, we are still not operating from a place of love, and we're in a contracted energy, instead of an expansive energy of love. And so when somebody presents opposing data to us, and we're like, you know what, I don't like them, I don't agree with them, and we want to argue, we want to fight, we want to be angry about things and critical or judgmental, any of those kind of versions of hate, we have to look at what is causing the fear there. Why are we so afraid, right? And I think a lot of times some of this does stem from trauma, and it could be something as simple as maybe you grew up in an environment where you were criticized a lot, and so or anytime that you were wrong, it was weaponized against you. If these things kept getting turned around, then it would be very important for you to develop this sense of, I have to be right, and protecting that at all costs. And so it can become very easy to fall into the trap of hatred instead of love when you've experienced that kind of criticism, because it becomes a huge threat when somebody is challenging or offers a challenging or opposing idea to your belief system. And here's how I have been able to help myself with that. Not always, and sometimes it takes me a little bit and I have to process through, so don't think I always do this perfectly, because I'm just as immune to everybody else of falling into the trap of fear and judgment and criticism and all of those kind of things. But what I know is that when I am in that mode, what I am basically saying is, I am right, you are wrong, and then I am blocking and closing off any possibility to other options. And when I do that, I'm shutting down what could be a possible solution available to me. So, example, I think most of us would agree that stealing is wrong, right? So if you steal from somebody, that's not a good thing. Here's what I would challenge you. What kind of circumstances or situations would have to occur or be in place in order for you to feel that stealing was an appropriate option? I'll let you sit and think with that. So when I think of that, it's like, yeah, I agree, stealing, absolutely, 100%, that's wrong, you don't do it, blah, blah, blah. And then when I think of, well, what kind of circumstances would have to be in place for me to feel like it's not a wrong decision to steal something? And I'd be like, oh, well, you know what, if I had kids or even myself, just by myself, and I had no food, no money, no ability to get any of that stuff, and I see a loaf of bread sitting there, and I know it's not mine, but I have the ability to take it, and, you know, I've tried to ask for, you know, ability to, you know, can you give me some, or, you know, because I'm going to try all other options, but all of those have been shot down, and now I have no foreseeable option available to me. If I take that loaf of bread in order for my kids to live, I could see that being an okay. Now, somebody out there, I know somebody said, yeah, but Tina, you just didn't negotiate properly. And I'm like, well, you know what? My kids are starving. I am going to steal that loaf of bread so that they can live, kind of thing, right? So it's an exercise, not in a literal situation, but of seeing what is possible. So when we start to look at things from that perspective, it changes our viewpoint. It allows us to be more open to somebody else's circumstances, somebody else's viewpoints and experiences that they've been through, because a lot of times people will do things that we might judge or view as bad, and we hate that behavior, hate the behavior, not the person. And what ends up happening is we get stuck into blocking off possibilities for healing, for change for them, because then it's now we're in an opposing us against them, right versus wrong. And that doesn't help anybody, right? So they can't see it from your viewpoint and you can't see it from their viewpoint. So there's a divide there. And that is the whole premise of a return to love, Course in Miracles, that kind of stuff. That God is love, and love is the only thing that's real. So us returning to love, returning to those behaviors, is a return to God. And that can be in any form, whatever your spiritual, religious preferences are. I know I was extremely resistant. I am more Christian than anything, but I can see how I can take these principles from another religion and that can still apply to my current beliefs. So, and this is how I apply this, right? So, and I like to think of, like, in the video game World of Warcraft, where you'd have the Horde and the Alliance, right? Both sides felt like they were right, and then you'd have different battles that were happening. And depending on their circumstances, their viewpoints of what they went through, you could see both sides, right? So, and it makes it challenging because now it's not so black and white. It's more complicated in trying to deal with things, and there's a lot more complexity in the problems, where it's just easier to kind of go, oh, I hate that person, and you write them off, and it makes it easier for decisions, but it doesn't make it easier for collaboration. And it ends up causing us pain and them pain in the long run. So, and I think I watched a movie years ago called Crash, and there was a really good example in that movie where there was a cop, which is supposed to be the good guy, and he does something that is not good with this girl that I don't know if he sexually assaulted her. I can't remember all the details, but it caused her to be extremely afraid of him, and she managed to get away, but he was being abusive with his power. And then later on in the movie, there was a car crash, and he was the cop, and she was the victim in the car crash, and she was terrified seeing him, but he actually saved her from the car. So it's like, is this guy good or is he bad? It depends on the particular situation. And I think the whole premise of this is that we all have the capacity to be the villain and the hero. And knowing that within ourselves, it's a matter of when we're doing healing work and inner healing work, this is where we have to take a look at our own inner demons, our own monster within, and starting to face that and starting to look at those kind of things, because it's not the hate that others leverage on us and throw at us that actually hurts us. It's the hate that we have for ourselves and our own behaviors that cause the most damage. And so being able to look at ourselves and the areas of our lives, our being, that we actually hate about ourselves, that is what the healing and the inner work is for. It is not about whether or not you're being this good, righteous, super perfect person kind of thing. That's not what healing work is. It's about facing those dark parts of ourselves and learning to embrace that, and learning to pour love into that part of ourselves that by all measurements is not deserving of that love. And so this is where having a connection with a spiritual being, whether that's God, Jesus, Buddha, whatever your beliefs are. I'm not going to go through all the religion, or maybe you believe in science. It doesn't matter to me. I think God is infinite enough to give us multiple paths for us all to find our way back to Him, whatever that pathway may be for us. So, because the whole point is, any of that hatred, any of that anger, any of that fear serves as a way to divide us, right? And if you think not only in your personal life, but in your professional life, when we think of businesses, anytime you hear companies talking about, oh, you know what, all the departments were siloed. What does that mean? That means you've been divided. You guys aren't talking. You aren't working together. You are all doing your own little thing and just in your own little worlds, right? And that is a great way of divide. And what's the following word that comes out of it? You divide and you conquer, right? Divide and conquer. So anything that is separation, that drives us away from ourselves, from others, from love, right? From connectedness, from oneness, is actually what the enemy is. So learning to recognize those signs, whether that's personally, so if you're disconnected, so let's talk about weight loss and stuff like that, okay? If I'm doing, and I've done a lot of weight loss, I've been up and down the scales, I've been as high as almost 400 pounds. I don't have the exact number because the scale didn't go up that high. I just knew once it got over that threshold that I was probably around that. How much over that, I don't know. But so I've been up and down the scale, various levels, and the thing that has worked the best for me is not doing it because I hate my body. And that's how I started losing weight in the first place, when I was only 140 pounds. And then I started losing weight because I hated that I was fat. I'm like, honestly, if only. And I always got told and criticized and was told things like, hey, if you just lost another 10 pounds, you would just be amazing. So it just didn't matter whatever the size was. The message was, you are not enough. The way you are right now today is not enough. And healing work is loving yourself in spite of your flaws today. I'm not saying don't change. I'm not saying don't get healthy. So for anybody that's starting to get their back up, saying I'm encouraging, obesity and stuff like that. No, that is a protection mechanism, and it's a trauma response. Okay, that has been my experience with it, and it's changing slowly as I work on making myself feel safer. And as I do that, that's when the armor drops, right? I can release that. I can let go of that, because now I don't need it as a protection mechanism. So, but going through the process of trying to lose weight because I hated my body, any food I took, any activity I did, it was all out of hatred of who I was, rather than shifting that perspective to, no, now I do this, now I work out not because of hatred and I have to change because I'm not good enough, to I am deserving of living in a healthy body. I am deserving and worthy of being healthy. And so that comes more from a place of love and pouring that love into myself versus oh, I'm never going to measure up. I'm not good enough. This is wrong. This is wrong. And putting the proper energy into myself and I catch myself because there's still parts of myself where I'll look at my body and I'm like, you know what, I don't really like that. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But at the same time, I got to appreciate, how strong my legs are because they've carried all this weight. I've got to appreciate that my body has endured all the abuse that I've put it through and I'm still relatively healthy. So, there's all these kind of things. So giving yourself credit for what you've been able to get through, giving yourself credit for the areas that you have been strong actually matter. And so that is part of healing and bridging the divide within yourself. So instead of, cutting off certain areas of yourself, looking at those parts that you hate about yourself, whether that's your personality traits, or you hate that you're shy, or you hate that you're awkward, or you hate that, that you can't control your temper, or whatever it is that you're feeling or you're struggling with that you don't like about yourself. I want you to shift that perspective and find what circumstances would those behaviors, those qualities, those traits that you hate about yourself actually be a positive. How would those be something that are good? And understanding and learning to love yourself from that perspective, right? So for myself, I had a lot of self-loathing. Especially early in my journey, I had a lot of self-hatred. I felt nothing I did was ever good enough. And I've gotten better over the years. But back then, it was really, really painful. And it didn't matter what nice things people said to me. I wasn't able to receive those compliments. I wasn't able to receive that love from people because of how deep the self-loathing was. And I improved it, but I didn't actually expand the cup. So I emptied all the hatred out and I had this love that I could receive, but it was only a small amount. And now I'm at the level where I'm actually expanding and being able to receive even more love. And that's important, right? And we can't do that if we're still in conflict with ourselves. If we still hate those parts of ourselves where we're falling short, that is where we need to give ourselves the most compassion, the most understanding. And giving yourself that doesn't mean that's a free pass not to change. It's a matter of recognizing that when you are in those negative states, when you're in that hateful energy, whether it's towards yourself or others, that is just a cry for love. And you need to give that to yourself first. And when you can do that for yourself, you can actually extend that to other people. So when you do those kind of things, that's where you start to really heal that part of yourself that maybe you don't feel deserves forgiveness. Maybe you don't feel it that you're able to make those changes. Hey Peter, good to see you. So it's a matter of pouring that into ourselves, and when we can do that for ourselves, and why it's so vital is because when we start to do that, in whatever capacity that may be. So I know when I first started with it, I was like, oh, okay, I know I don't really like my body, and if anybody had asked me anything about my body, I would have said, no, it's all terrible. I hate everything about my body. My hair, my eyes, my lips, the way I look, everything was terrible. And so I was like, okay, you know what, I got to find one thing. And I was like, you know what, my hands aren't too bad. I guess I got strong hands. I like that about myself. And I got good skin. So that's where I started. Find one little thing that you can start with to love and appreciate about yourself. and then start expanding that, right? So start pouring into yourself of like, you know what? I got really cool hands. I don't care if you're like, oh, I got really cool eyebrows. Whatever it is that you can find something about yourself that you actually like and pour into that. Feed that part of it rather than feeding the hatred and the self-loathing of I'm not there yet, I'm not good enough, I'm not this enough. Because that is pouring fear into yourself, and then you're dealing with an illusion. And the truth is that we have the power to create the love and the life that we want, but we have to be that ourselves. Okay? And we have to heal the divide that is within us. And when we heal that divide within us, then we can start branching out beyond ourselves to relationships with others. But if we have this divide and this hatred within ourselves, and then we branch out to others, I'm not saying that you can't, because being around others who do actually love themselves or have that capacity for things that you are lacking, whether that's feeling a sense of connectedness, feeling a sense of happiness and joy and purpose, any of those kind of things, or financially they're doing better. If they have those things and you do not have those things, wanting those things, it's important to learn from those people and learn what it is that they do differently than you, so that you can learn those skills, because it's all teachable, learnable skills of whether or not, and the fact that you don't love yourself is because you were taught not to love yourself. You were taught to hate yourself. You were taught to criticize and belittle and shame and blame, and all of those things are learned behaviors. And maybe those worked for us at certain times, and maybe that's why we continue to do that, because I know for myself, being hard on myself, being critical of myself, helped me learn to be hyper-vigilant and anticipate the needs of what's going to happen with the abuser. And I was able to focus on if it was my fault, then I had some sort of control over the situation. And if I was able to make the changes in my behavior, then I was able to influence the external environment. So I learned to become super adaptable. I learned to set aside what it is that I wanted. And while sometimes those are really good qualities, they need to be balanced, because if not, if they're too far off, you end up being a doormat, a people pleaser, and you never get your needs met, and that breeds resentment and hatred and anger and fear and all of those kind of things. So what starts out as something that you're doing, well, in doing it from that perspective, you're doing it from fear anyway. You're doing it out of a sense of needing protection, of needing that love. So that is not the right state to be in. So when we focus on being in a state of love, that is an expression of we have abundance to give, and it's because we have that abundance within us. And for me, where that abundance comes from is from my spiritual connection, because I get that personal connection with God, and that fills me up with love. So even when I'm feeling low, if I tap into prayer, meditation, then I'm able to fill myself up, and then I can extend that to others. So being able to learn from people that do things differently and seeing things from a different perspective, we can heal ourselves, we can heal others, and this is what doing the inner work is all about. Because when we learn to love our own demons, when we learn to forgive ourselves for our own mistakes, and be understanding and patient with ourselves, that just becomes a natural default setting when we're dealing with other people, right? So these are all things that I practice on a regular basis, and I put these things into practice, and I become very vigilant because, and I think this is kind of like a level of mastery that ends up happening because before, you know, it's easy to pinpoint when you're having these super reactive stages. So when you start to be a little bit more even keel, this is where you master it at a different level of like, okay, I'm not being reactive. I learned to control those reactions, but I'm still feeling uncomfortable. I don't like this person's energy. I don't like this person or what they're doing. And I have to question myself, well, what is it that I am afraid of? If I listen to them and I hear what they have to say, what's the fear? Well, sometimes the fear could be, well, if I listen to them, I could be wasting my time, sure. Or they're going to make me angry. And it's like, okay, well, if they make you angry just by listening to them, you definitely need to question what's going on there. Why are you so afraid? Because that anger, see, I see all anger as fear. It's like, why are you afraid? Like, what are you afraid is going to happen by just listening to somebody else's viewpoint, even if you don't agree with it? Well, they might give some compelling evidence or a different perspective, and if all of a sudden they give a different perspective and I agree with that perspective, now that challenges my whole belief system, my whole foundation, and I may have to kind of look at, oh, maybe the world isn't the way that I thought it was. Maybe all this time I thought I was right about this particular thing, but seeing it from this perspective, that might mean I am no longer justified in behaving the way I've behaved in certain situations, because now I have to look at things from a different perspective. And maybe that means I might have to change something about what I do, what I believe, what I think. And it's like, oh, now I'm not justified in treating that person the way that I was treating them, because now I can see it from their viewpoint. And now I might have to admit I did some things wrong. And if you grew up in an environment where you were criticized or punished for doing things wrong, that might be something that is really, really challenging for you to allow. That it triggers a threat response within you, that you can't see it from the other person's perspective. And then, of course, you've got psychology that'll label all kinds of things, because the person that can't see things from another person's perspective and only sees it from theirs is on the narcissism spectrum. And, I think that psychology and the diagnosis and the labeling and the compartmentalizing, just being able to segregate and understand, it's like, okay, well, these kind of behaviors are grouped into this area and that area, and these behaviors are in this area. That's all a divide and conquer model, right? This is all of ways of showing how we're separate, how we're different. And I get it. There's some practical applications that apply to that. However, what ends up happening is people just sit on those labels and go, it's an us against them. And where is that beneficial to anybody? Is it beneficial in business? Us against them internally, if you have that with your customers. If you wouldn't fight with your customers. Why? Because your business is there to serve a customer, to solve a problem for them. If you're fighting all the time with them, then that's a divide and conquer kind of thing. And you know enough to be able to understand, it's like, oh, okay, here this customer has money, they're looking for a solution, so now you're open, now you're understanding. So you have to apply those same principles to whatever relationships that you're dealing with, where you have that anger, that fear. It's like, I don't really like this person. Well, why don't you like this person? Ask yourself why. What is it that you don't like? They don't agree with your principles. Okay. They're always late. They have no respect. Okay. In what circumstances would it be okay? What criteria would it be okay for you to be, it's okay that they were late? You're going to see that from a different perspective. It's like, oh, maybe they had somebody that had an illness, or maybe their kid was sick, or something like that. Whatever it is, right? So it's not a matter of whether or not that behavior is right or wrong. That behavior is just that behavior. It's us that puts that filter, that puts that spin of right and wrong on it. And depending on what lens we're looking at it through, we could be pushing people further away or drawing people further in. And if we want them to correct that behavior, doesn't it make more sense to approach it from a loving perspective, for a drawing them in kind of perspective, rather than putting up that wall, that division of you're wrong, I'm right, fuck you, right? It's like, no, I will never, you can never ever convince me that this is ever right, Tina. Okay, then you've chosen to have that divide, right? That you've blocked off that connectedness. And if you block it off in one area, it doesn't stay there. It gets blocked in all other areas. When we block off our emotions, we don't allow ourselves to feel anger, okay? Because anger is a bad emotion, and I'm not going to let myself feel angry. So I'm just always going to be forgiving, and I am always going to just be loving and never acknowledge those feelings. Well, when you start to repress one feeling, it represses and blocks all of them. And then next thing you know, you're now numb. You don't feel happiness, you don't feel joy, you don't feel content, you don't feel angry either, you don't feel depressed, you don't feel sad, you're just like turned off. You have nothing going on. The spark, the light and the life in you starts to die out because you've turned those emotions off. You've not allowed yourself, you've blocked the flow. So when we do that, it's all in a spectrum, right? So when we block off and we say that we don't like somebody else, I really challenge you to look at why don't you like them. And sometimes it's because, so I had this example, there was this girl at work that I was getting really, really frustrated with, and she was kind of mousy, she was shy, she was timid, and I didn't like that. I didn't like it at all about her. And it wasn't until I was able to see the areas of my life, so whatever defect of character that they have, in 12-step groups they call this taking somebody else's inventory. So write down whatever qualities that they have that you don't like. I hate this about them. They don't take care of their hair. Their teeth are crooked. Look at this. Look at that. They don't work out at the gym. They don't do this. They don't do that. Whatever it is, right? Whatever judgments, hatred, anger you have towards them, write those down. Write down the qualities. It's like, they don't take care of themselves. They're not financially responsible. They're not this. They're not that. Write all of those judgments down. And now you have an inventory list that you have to work on for yourself. And this is where you have to look at, okay, so in what areas of my life am I not being financially responsible? And you're like, oh, no, I'm good. I got all this money in the bank. I do this and I do that. And it's like, oh, okay, well, what other areas, what are you doing the best that you can be? Or there's some areas that you could maybe make some improvements. When you focus on those, now you don't have that judgment of them. Just like when I was dealing with that girl and I realized I didn't like her mousy, timid behavior, and I asked myself, where in my life, because at the time I didn't think I was being mousy or timid at all. In fact, most of the time people told me I was too aggressive. So, and I realized it was with my mom that I was being mousy and timid, and I wouldn't speak up, and I wouldn't say the things that I really wanted to say. And so I was in this people-pleasing, tippy-toeing around, walking on eggshells kind of energy, which is really fucking annoying when somebody does that to you, especially if you're trying to be nice to them and you're like, I haven't done anything to cause you to start behaving this way. And but she had this thing too where she would draw bullies to her, to pick on her, to prove to prove that, you know, she wasn't good enough, right? And to reinforce that programming that she had when she was younger. And yes, I am hearing myself right now, so thanks. So I'm just basically here talking to myself anyway, so if you guys get something out of this, even better. But this has been healing for me, and uncovering some of the stuff that I learned when I first went through healing recovery therapy stuff. But so writing these things down, and when I actually worked on that area, I realized, oh, you know what? There's been some things that I've been needing to say to my mom. I haven't actually done it, and I actually worked on that, and because I was working on a lot of the sexual abuse stuff and my experiences with that. And I remember I sat my mom down and I confronted her, and I told her just how much I hated her, how angry I was with her, that she didn't do anything to save me from that environment. And I remember once I confronted that and I spoke that truth that I hadn't been speaking, my irritation with this girl at work went completely away. It was gone. It didn't bother me. She was still the same, the way that she was, but now it didn't bother me. So it wasn't that I disliked her anymore. In fact, I actually had a lot of compassion for her. Why? Because I took the time that whatever judgment I had on her, I took that on myself, and I found, where is that happening in my own life? When I healed that, that's when I was able to release that, and it now no longer had any effect on me. So this is where I challenge you to say, well, if you're finding that, well, you don't have to like them to learn from them. That's good. That's good that you're learning from them. But I challenge you to go even deeper. What is it that you don't like about them? And why is that? What is the judgment that you have there? And then I want you to write that down, and I want you to look for that in your life. Where are you actually doing that? And when you actually do that inner work and you heal that piece, I can promise you, you'll go back, and that person that you didn't like so much, all of a sudden now they're very likable, and you can see good in them, and you're like, oh, okay, that's not such a big deal after all. Or maybe it is. Maybe it is. There's still things that, no, I can't tolerate that. And I'm not saying don't set boundaries. Don't get that wrong. You can set boundaries. You can still choose not to have that person around or in your life. But now it just won't have that damaging effect on you. So this is what it is to do the healing inner work. And people are brought into our lives. It's to irritate the shit out of us because there's something within us that actually needs to be healed. So when we do that, we can appreciate that. And when we've learned the lesson, those people go away. They go away. They've served their purpose. The people that are here to help us grow, to help us expand and be our best self and give us that support and encouragement, those are the people that stay around in our lives for a long time. And the ones that are here to teach us those lessons, those painful lessons, those are the ones that they come in for a short time and then they leave. But the ones that are assigned, that are here to love us, even if we're not in physical proximity of each other, that love always stays. And it's when we learn to love the ones that are here to hurt us, that are here to irritate us, those are the ones, that's when we get a lot of growth, right? Because that's when we heal ourselves, when we learn to love the ones that have hurt us. And that is a really, really powerful state that I hope everybody is able to get to that. And not from a fake way either. Not like, oh, because I tried so many times to do this as a kid with my mom, and I was like, oh, I know the logical thing is to forgive her, and she was a single mom, and she went through all these things, but I didn't process any of my emotions. It's when it goes from your head to your heart, that's when you know you've actually healed. Where it's a feeling. You feel that love and acceptance for them. That there is no hate in your heart for them. That's when you know that you've done the healing work. That's when you are free. That's when you will be happy, is when you've been able to transition that. So as long as it's still a head thing, it's like, yeah, I know, I don't hate them. Like, they just need to be over there. I just can't agree with them. I don't like their viewpoint. I don't like their opinion. I don't like the way they operate. Whatever it is, right? Still having that is still carrying, it's a smaller amount, but it's still carrying that hatred, that fear. And if that's in your system, that can grow and expand. And then you've got to do a lot of healing inner work, right? So with that, guys, I hope this was helpful. It's the concept of hate, and really love is the only thing that's real. Being able to do that inner work within ourselves, healing the divide within ourselves, and loving that monster within, loving those demons within, and pouring love into ourselves for that, giving ourselves that forgiveness. And I do this by being able to tap into the spiritual aspect of things. And I bring that energy, I fill myself up, and I'm able to help fill others. So, guys, I hope that was helpful to you, and I hope you guys have a great day. If you came in partway through, the recording will be uploaded on my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125. You can catch the replay there. If you are on Facebook, you can type in #replay, and this helps boost this so that other people can see the content, because not everybody gets to see this. So with that, guys, I'm going to wrap this up, and I will be back on tomorrow night. If you have any questions, anything that you'd like me to cover, let me know, and I will do a training on that and share my experience with these things. Okay? All right, guys, you have a great night, and we will talk to you tomorrow. Bye.